Hello you, it's me. Today we're going to talk about Grave Peril by Jim Butcher, which is book 3 in the Dresden Files series, which follows Harry Dresden, who is a private investigator, a wizard, and a police consultant for the Special Investigations branch of the Chicago PD, and it's set in modern-day Chicago. Since this is getting into a series, we're already on book 3, this review is probably going to have a few spoilery elements, storyline elements in. Obviously, I will warn when the spoilers are coming. I will also link the reviews at the end for book 1 and book 2. So maybe watch them first if you don't want spoilers. So we'll have the sort of story section, the non-spoiler section, the spoiler section, and at the end, like I've done in the previous 2 videos, I'm going to go through predictions that I've made, whether they've been confirmed, whether I've been wrong, whether there'll be any new predictions. We'll see how I did. This story mainly revolves around Harry trying to discover the nature of and stop something which has broken its way through the thinning veil between this world and the Never Never. And like book 1, but to an even larger degree in this one, there are a lot of storylines which run parallel, which tie together at the end, interweave throughout the story, and then culminate in sort of a big finish. Also, like book 1, this was done fantastically well, which was a huge relief after book 2 being okay, and not much more than okay. So far, this is definitely my favourite of the 3. So the interweaving storylines in this one are the Thing having broken through the Never Never, wreaking havoc in Chicago, and which Harry believes initially to be some sort of super ghost. Spirits going haywire in general, and a massively increased level of spirit activity. The Vampire Court inviting Harry to a ball to celebrate the ascension and promotion of Bianca, a character from book 1 who has a venomous grudge against Dresden. The fallout from a separate case, worked by Dresden and Karen Murphy in the past a few months earlier. And a character introduced from Harry's past, who he has a very interesting relationship with. Now this one really actually did address a gripe I had with the previous 2 books, in that I felt they were Harry plus a backdrop of sort of B-listers. This one introduced so many extra characters, more characters that clearly were not just this book characters and are going to be recurring. And I do feel a theme of this book, one of the main themes of this book, is Harry growing as a person, realising that it is okay to have friends to rely on, to let into your life, to let into your main story and be main characters alongside you. I mean, instantly as the story starts, we're introduced to Harry's friend, Michael. And one thing I really can commend this book on is how instantly the characters that are introduced, you accept them as part of the story because they fit the tone so well. One of the things that was refreshing as well, speaking about Michael, is that his involvement with the supernatural is on the basis that he is a very religious, righteous man fighting against the same things that Harry fights against. But in supernatural stories, these characters that are super religious are often holier than thou sort of zealots. And I really feel like Michael broke that stereotype and was just a really nice guy. And his expression of what it means to be a good Christian is just to help people. So there were a lot of characters in this that I thought were well written that I immediately really loved. Alongside this introduction of new characters came the introduction of new species, new threats, new factions. And there is a feeling of world building in this book much more than in the previous 2. We learn about the various vampire courts, and it does introduce a key player from each of the 3 vampire courts. It's not really a spoiler, but which makes me think they're going to be recurrent and more prevalent in the later books, because they didn't have a huge part to play in this story, but were still very much there. We learned a little bit about the various ways in which religious organisations are tied in to the same things that Harry is fighting. We also learn a little bit more about how the Never Never works as a realm, as a physical / non-physical upside-downy place. But we are still sort of piecing that together as a reader, and that's not all being given away at once, which I do like. In terms of new baddies, I did pick up this book, get about a fifth of the way through, and I was like, oh, okay, this is going to be a ghost book. It's ghosts are the flavour of the week, obviously. But this book pulled a sneaky on me several times, and there were a lot of twists that happened in this book that really were not obvious twists. So, one of my gripes in the previous Dresden stories that I've read were that Harry got nerfed or powered down. I'm going to say nerfed from now on, because everybody, I think, knows what that means. But I felt like it was done in the previous book to make the challenge more challenging. I was thinking about this for a while, and I feel like one of the things that was missing from the previous book was the sort of actual factual police work, detective side of things that was prevalent in book 1. And I feel like if Dresden got powered down, nerfed to the extent where he couldn't rely on magic and had to turn more to the detective police work side of things and his own sort of intelligence and wit to get out of situations, the nerfing could work well, and it probably would make the story more interesting. However, it didn't really. And I feel like a nerf doesn't really mean anything if you're going to get backed into a corner almost to the point of you're going to die, and then pull some magic out of your sleeve at the last minute and be at superpower anyway. I mean, why did you nerf him in the first place? I get that he was nerfed as a side effect of something happening that was plot integral, but I don't think it was something that needed to happen here. I do hope there's not going to be a continual theme of Harry manages to turn everything around at the last minute and always wins. I do think there's a little bit of tragic loss in this book, but nothing permanent. And I do think that failure sometimes can really make a reader sympathise with characters sort of on that next level. They need to fail. There needs to be sort of, oh no, what have I done? Harry did feel to me a little bit more serious in this book. And I don't know if that's because he had more at stake in terms of people he cared about being in danger, or if he had Michael with him as sort of that calming influence which did change his personality. But in the end, it did still revert back to Dresden when he's backed up against the wall, snarky, quip, sarcasm. And it was something that I had missed throughout the book, and it was like, oh, he's back, my boy's back. I've watched and read some other reviews of this book, both on BookTube and Goodreads. And I do feel like there's kind of two schools of thought for this one. People that really liked Full Moon seem to not like this one. And people that really didn't like Full Moon think that this one is a massive improvement. Just thought that was interesting. Right. Spoiler bits. There's going to be spoilers from here on out. So if you haven't read this book and you don't want it spoiled, then turn this off now and go watch something else. So things I liked, things I didn't like, things I wasn't sure about. One of my biggest gripes with this book was the Kravos storyline. That so many references were made to a storyline which didn't happen in this book, but didn't happen in any other book as well. I feel like it could have worked if it had been done as a separate sort of spin-off novella or a spin-off graphic novel. But I feel like the Kravos out of nowhere aspect of this book kind of jarred me a little bit, as it was continual reference to something that the reader wasn't familiar with and was having to piece together a past event that happened between book 2 and book 3. I just thought that was a bit weird. Also, with Kravos, if at the end it was sort of revealed that it wasn't a demon, that it had been Kravos all along, but Harry summoned the demon, and it responded to the name in Kravos' book, which is fair enough, but then it was pulled away by Kravos during the summoning. Was Kravos involved with the demon at all? Or was it the smashing things up that was the demon and under sort of Kravos' influence? Or Kravos being responsible just for the possession side of things? The distinction of who was responsible for what in that duo, if that duo even existed, was kind of unclear, and it felt for me like the summoning that Harry did, where he tried to catch the demon in the circle, really it made me feel like it was a plot hole rather than clearing anything up. Maybe I'm just misinterpreting that. Right, I love Thomas. Thomas is so cool. I love the idea that maybe you shouldn't judge people based on their faction. I love the idea that because of this, there are clearly going to be wildcards in the series, people whose allegiances are not obvious. I love the idea of that tenuous trust, the situational reliance with Harry and Thomas. I really, with the White Court, and I hope he's back more. With the courts, are the distinctions between the vampires' lifestyle choices, with the vampires behaving differently? I.e., with the Red Court being sort of your generic blood-based vampires, the White Court being more sex and emotion-feeding vampires, the Black Court being disgraced and sort of magic users with a more corpse-like appearance and less of an emphasis on outward beauty? Or are they the results of these vampires being just completely different subspecies? Are they completely separate vampire bloodlines, like in the Kim Newman Anno Dracula series? So I can't wait for more information about the courts. I feel like there is a heck of a lot that could be built on. I'm excited to learn more about that. I liked Leah, or Lee. I thought the relationship between her and Harry was super weird, but did actually capture the completely bonkers nature of fairies. I also loved the idea of hellhounds in the service of Fae, which is something that actually ties into Welsh folklore, which I'm into in a big way, with the Cwn Annwn, which are the spectral hounds of the fairy wild hunts, which serve the fairy queens of Cadair Idris, and the wild hunts of Gwyn ap Nudd, the king of the Welsh underworld. These dogs were actually branded as hellhounds by the early British Christian church because sort of fairy folklore didn't sit too well with them back then. So I really do love that folklore reference. I think that's very cool. Speaking of fairies and Leah, there is a point in the story with Harry and Leah striking a deal. And during the striking of that deal, Harry says, and I quote, "If I die, you don't get me at all." And he does die at the end of the story, momentarily, which is how he's able to force create his own ghost to fight Kravos alongside him. I warned you there was going to be spoilers. And I do wonder if this is something that didn't mean anything, whether it's something that's going to be overlooked, or whether it's something that Harry is actually going to be able to use as leverage. He also name drops the Summer Court, which I think is going to be sort of a fairy faction, which can come into play later. With the lack of policing and detective stuff in this book, I was also a little bit disappointed with the lack of Karen Murphy, who I feel like still could do with a lot of character development. The only really symbolic moment with Karen Murphy was at the end of the book, towards the end of the book, where she had a moment with Harry and it sort of reset their relationship. It was sort of a, okay, now we're friends again, we've been through this together type thing. I like that this book, in a way the other two didn't, feels like the start of a continuous story. There are possible repercussions for Harry. It's very unclear at the end of the book whether he did or didn't kill people or was responsible for their death. The impending war threatened between the Red Court and the White Council. What's going to happen to Susan? Friendships or alliances to be forged between Harry and Thomas, the White Court, White Council. Are those names similar for a reason? Is there going to be a tie-in? Are there going to be parallels drawn? More we have to learn about Leah. The hints that are still being dropped about Harry's past. This was book 3 in a series, but it felt like book 1 in a story. So this is the prediction section. I knew Harry was going to get with Susan. I think that's still on the cards, despite the open ending. I freaking knew that Susan was going to get turned into something, so I called that. Also, that high-ranking fairies are going to come into play and be a threat, called that. None of my other calls have been disproven yet. I'm still waiting. Some probably will. We're waiting on them. New calls I'm going to make. New predictions. Susan is going to have Harry's baby, but not before she's fully cured, and I reckon there's going to be consequences for the child. The next book, Summer Night, I think is either going to be a reference to Michael, as in the Knight Michael, or reference to the summer court, and it's going to be very fairy heavy. Murphy is going to be shook from being magically tortured, and there's going to be character development with her on that. There's going to be internal conflict within the White Court between Thomas and his father, Thomas having been referred to in this story as a bastard who is the lowest of the White Court and not recognised. But because I like Thomas, I really feel like there is going to be sort of a sudden but inevitable betrayal where everything is sort of overtaken by Thomas's innate vampire nature and Harry's going to have to kill him or something, or Michael. The Kravos magic that Harry ate is going to be sort of a sliver of darkness that eats away at him from the inside and is not going to be good. That the White Council is going to be all over Harry for what he did at the Red Court ball, and Morgan is going to be on him and tearing him a new one. Like this book a hell of a lot more than I liked the previous two. I'm going to give this 4 stars. It's so much better than book 1 and book 2. I feel like there's still room for the story to develop. I'm excited for what's going to happen. Can't wait to crack on with the rest of the series, but I'm telling myself, drag it out. It won't get this forever. So thank you very much for watching. Like and subscribe for more. There's always more on the way. I read pretty quick. If there's anything you'd like me to read, comment below. If you've read this, tell me what you thought of it. Tell me what you thought of my opinions, if you agree, if you disagree. Yep, that's pretty much it. Check out the videos that I did reviewing book 1 and book 2 if you haven't already. Thanks for watching again, and I will see you soon.